Welcome back to what you need to know for audio engineers. In this video, we're talking about compression. So we have talked about the instruments on stage. Those instruments are sending a signal through, a microphone or through a direct box to the preamp. So the first thing that signal sees after the stage is the preamp. And then after the preamp, it goes to the EQ. After the EQ comes compression. So the audio signal passes through each of these stages one by one. So depending on how you set the gain and the EQ can have a pretty big effect on the compressor. We are limiting the dynamic range in decibels. So here is our dynamic range. Here's as loud as the signal can get, and here's as quiet as the signal can get. We're going to engage our compressor, and it's going to do this. So now this is as loud as our signal can get, and this is as quiet as it can get. We can make it this much, we can make it that much, we can make it that much. The compressor limits the dynamic range, and we have total control over how much it limits the dynamic range using a couple of controls. So the attack control is the first control that you'll probably see. Once the compressor has been triggered by an audio signal, the attack control tells the compressor how quickly to engage. And the release control controls how long the compressor is on after it has been turned on. The ratio control is a mathematical ratio. So the ratio acts and the compression acts above the threshold. If you have a compression ratio of 2 to 1, every 2 decibels that the signal reaches above the threshold, the signal will be reduced to 1 decibel. If you have a ratio of 10 decibels, every 10 decibels that the signal reaches above the threshold will be reduced to 1 decibel. So if you have a signal that is reaching 20 decibels above the threshold, and you have a ratio of 10 to 1, then the compressor will reduce the signal above the threshold to 2 decibels. The threshold control is also measured in decibels, and this is the decibel level at which the compressor actually engages, or when it is triggered. So if you have a threshold of minus 10 or something like that, the compressor will not be triggered until the audio signal hits minus 10 decibels. Your signal hits the compressor, it reaches the threshold, it turns on according to the attack control, and it compresses by the amount as specified by the ratio, and then it turns off when the release time is completed. And then the last control is the gain control. If we have a lot of reduction, then the gain control can help us make up for lost loudness. What needs compression? The most important thing that I think needs compression in worship music is the vocal. The compressor is going to help keep the vocal present in the mix. That's its job. It is to keep the vocal at the same volume the entire song, so that the loud singing and the quiet singing is the same volume. We can run into many, many, many problems with compression if we don't know how to use it. So again, I'll say the first problem with a compressor is that you don't know how to use it. You don't know what the controls do. You don't know how they interact with each other. You have to spend a long time working with compression and practicing with it, and really kind of developing your ear for compression. And there's no substitute for long hours and lots of work to develop that skill of listening. A very common term that we hear used in music production is over-compressed signals. So over-compression is usually it's a bad thing. If we are over-compressing a signal, it doesn't sound natural anymore. We always want a compressed signal to sound just as natural as it does without the compressor. I think a great listening example of this is go listen to Christian Stanfill singing at the live Passion conferences. His compression is always perfect on his vocal. It is so natural that the impression that you get is that, wow, Christian Stanfill is a great singer. He's an incredible singer. When in reality, the audio engineer is a great audio engineer because they are using compression to elevate his voice. Christian Stanfield is a great singer, but he's helped out a lot by his audio engineer. So we want to avoid overcompression is the point of this. And how do we fix overcompression? We need to make sure that the ratio is not set too high for the particular instrument and that the threshold is not set too low. If the threshold is set too low, then the compressor will basically always be engaged, and it will always be engaging at this ratio. Compression can also contribute to issues with feedback. So if we are having an issue with feedback, the first place to go is the preamp and the EQ. If the first thing that we go to in our sound check is, we skip over the preamp and we skip over the EQ, we go straight to the compressor and turn that on, then we're doing things out of order. We need to work in order. We need to work in order of the signal chain. Make sure the source is correct. Make sure the preamp is correct. Make sure the EQ is compensating for irregularities in the room. Then go to your compressor and see if you can use it to fine-tune that sound. For a vocal, make sure that you can keep that vocal consistent across the entire mix, that it doesn't drop out, that it doesn't explode in volume. And if we're experiencing issues with feedback, we go back to our gain, we go back to our EQ, we fix our problem there. Because compressor is only going to make issues worse if we skip over the preamp and EQ. We need to do those first before we work with the compressor.
Right, so here's what a compressor looks like on our soundboard anyway, this particular compressor. It's got all those same controls on it. But we could see there's this nice graphical interface right here for us to visualize what is going on with our compressor. So we can take our threshold, bring that threshold down. Any signal that comes in this input meter, there's a little arrow right there. Signal coming into this input meter, whenever the signal goes above that arrow, it is above the threshold and will be compressing at the ratio that we have set. So a ratio of 1:1 is no compression. But we can go all the way up to infinity. So infinity has some different uses, but usually we're down in the 5 to 10 range. For our vocal, right here you can see here's how our vocal compressor is set for this week. Ratio of 3:1, threshold is -6. No extra gain, makeup gain was needed for this one, so got a really fast attack time, 73.1 microseconds, and a release time of 175 milliseconds. And then gain, we could see that just boosts everything. We could do parallel compression, where basically we have the compressed signal and the uncompressed dry signal running in parallel with each other. So that's one way to get a more natural sound out of a compressor. The best way to learn how to use a compressor is go to the internet and listen to people using these things, and then come to rehearsal and actually use one. Use your knowledge and engage your knowledge in a rehearsal. Just take a vocal. Start with the vocal. Take a vocal and just go crazy on the compressor. Turn the threshold all the way down and you'll hear the volume drop. Boost it up and you will hear the volume come back up. Take the threshold, set it somewhere in the middle, and then turn the ratio all the way up and hear what that does. Use the attack and the release knobs, see what those do. Gain is just going to turn the volume up and down. So, that's not hard to figure that one out.